Well, with our next speaker, there was a possibility that he might be delayed. So Olya Mandyuk, who runs the show, texted me and said, there might be a delay, you might have to tell some anecdotes. And I said, Olya, you've heard me tell my anecdotes. They are not at all appropriate for this group of people. In any case, we're delighted to say that our next speaker is not delayed, and we invite now Stephen Lecce, Minister of Energy and Electrification of the Province of Ontario, to the podium.
Well, good morning. It's good to be with you all. Your Excellencies, there are many of you here today, Consul Generals, Ambassadors. I want to also recognize Sharif Sabawi, my colleague, the Honourable Member from Mississauga, Aaron Mills. We are here really with a message of solidarity for the Ukrainian people as they have endured over 1,000 days of war by the Putin regime. I reflect with a great sense of pride as a student of history that sadly we're seeing history repeat itself. And in my former role, I served as Ontario's Minister of Education for 5 very long years, my friends. And if I could bring some levity to this moment. And in that experience, when I served as Minister of Education, one of my most proudest moments was standing with the Ukrainian community at this beautiful school called St. Demetrius in Etobicoke. And well, I haven't even got to the punchline yet, so there's more. But we stood with the school, we stood with these students, these young kids, many of whom were refugees, seeking the simplicity of freedom, of not having to wake up to bombs and alarms. And a beauty to see Canadian students with Ukrainian students come together as we announced that Ontario will be the first province in the country, to mandate Holodomor education within our publicly funded schools, Catholic and public English and French. Every student will recognize the perils of communism and totalitarianism and the extremes that is emerging within our political spectrum and the risks to our democracy, to our freedom, to our democratic way of life. And that was a very positive expression, because they say education is truly the greatest weapon against division. I mean, obviously your peoples are fighting a kinetic war, but in the hearts and minds of Canadians, I want them to understand that this type of extreme ideology is emerging again in Canada, and frankly in Ukraine most particularly, where we see the great evil empire, as Ronald Reagan once referred to, emerge again with their imperialist ambitions. And I think every Canadian, every humanitarian would accept a basic premise that in the 21st century, in Europe no less, we cannot, as a civil, free society, those that want to preserve the world order, cannot allow this type of barbarism to take place in any part of the world, let alone in Western Europe or in Western society in Eastern Europe. And so we came here really to express commitment to the values that your people have cherished for millennia, as you have endured, persevered, and overcome virtually every, some of the most darkest moments in human history. The Ukrainian people have demonstrated you are strong. And, 1,000 days on, we're here with the commitment to provide support to your people. And the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, is very committed to this plight, very committed to this cause. In the legislature, we initiated, with the support of my colleague Sharif Sabawi, we initiated an immediate resolution in support of Ukraine following the original invasion. In my former role, I used to work for Prime Minister Stephen Harper for also 5.5 years. And in that time, I recall with great sense of pride when he looked at Vladimir Putin in the eye and said, "Get out of Ukraine." He was referring to the original war in Crimea. And we obviously must continue to keep the pressure on him. One of my messages today to you is the importance of emphasizing that Ontario, Canada, but Ontario particularly, can play a critical role in supporting the energy grid, in supporting the Ukrainian people through some of the most darkest moments. And obviously, I was proud to go to the Rebuild Ukraine conference in Warsaw, Poland, just 2 weeks ago with my colleague Rudy Kazetto. And we announced that Ontario will be stepping up again with a $5 million emergency support for transmitters and generators to ensure the simple heat could be provided to families this winter as the Russian military uses civilian infrastructure, really focuses on civilian infrastructure to bomb and undermine the ability of getting heat and basic electricity to people. And so we don't take that for granted. We went to the conference with support and a commitment to continue to support the Ukrainian people. We also left that conference with a sense of resolution that the Ukrainian military and people are ready to fight to the end for their freedom, and that we have to be resolved as free states in supporting their cause and supporting them in the resurgence or the return of their sovereignty as it was originally intact. And so we went to the conference with a message of solidarity. We went there with support. We announced funding, and obviously the Minister of Energy in Ukraine was grateful to Canada, grateful to Ontario, but with the recognition we've got to do much, much more. And so I went there really to help understand and get an update on the situation on their civilian infrastructure. What I can say is what you all probably know, that the Putin is intentionally using civilian infrastructure and attacking civilians more increasingly belligerently. And it just speaks about his desperation and the need for the world to unite. So we provided that funding, but we've also ensured that there was support for those that had to come to our country. We've opened our doors. I mean, Canada is in fact, first nation on earth to recognize Ukrainian independence back in the early 90s under Prime Minister Mulroney. And I'm proud of that vintage, and I'm proud that we are still supporting them today. And as the refugees and these young kids and often mothers and children, but families have come to Canada, we've opened our doors. And in Ontario, we've ensured every single Ukrainian child fleeing this war had access to immediate education, supports in their language, mental health supports, all of the type of necessities you would expect of a civilized society. So we're doing that for those in Canada with the recognition that they want to return home one day too. And so our goal is to work with the national governments in creating the maximum pressure. We also went to Eastern Europe. We were in Poland and Estonia, in Baltic states, and the latter, right on the front line of Russian aggression, to make the case to the world. And a message I know that my American colleagues would certainly concur with, that we have to be intentional in decoupling dependence on purchasing Vladimir Putin's natural gas, petroleum, and nuclear fuels. That we cannot continue to finance the war machine that is undermining sovereign nations, not just in Europe, but in Asia too. And so we really emphasize that Ontario has an opportunity, be it in nuclear energy or as a Canadian, in other forms of exports, where we can help displace Russian resources with democratic, allied resources produced right here, generated right here in the province of Ontario. And so we will continue to play that leading role. We'll continue to emphasize that message. And in the meantime, we'll continue to celebrate the good that you're providing to the country. Sharif Zabawi, my colleague who's here, introduced in the Ontario's Parliament and Legislature the first Ukrainian Heritage Month bill. Now, this may not solve a war, but at the very least, it could lift the spirits of the Ukrainian people in this country, that their government stands with them, recognizes the importance of the cultural preservation, a culture and language that has been under siege by the Russian imperialist empire for hundreds and hundreds of years. So we will celebrate your contributions to our country, and we will stand with you until Ukraine is free. Thank you so much for this opportunity to join you today.